All right, let's move on. Professor Luke Perry from Utica College standing by. Good morning, Luke. How are you?
Good morning, Bill. I thought I was going to win some money. Baseball is my other passion.
I have to tell you, did you know the answer?
I did. That was what I was thinking.
That was kind of an easy one. But I guess if you've ever been a pitcher, you'd know, boy, can you curve a wiffle ball.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Luke, I want your take. Obviously, you're following the 22nd Congressional District very carefully in your blog and in your studies at Utica College. This was a doozy last week from Congresswoman Tenney, and the reaction has been pretty intense. What's your take?
Democrats and Republicans had long expected that at some point the three former representatives of our district would line up in opposition to Representative Tenney. I don't think anybody expected last week to be when that would happen. So why did this happen? I think Representative Tenney made some poorly worded comments. I guess that she most likely didn't anticipate making those or plan making those. And the big problem for her was how she handled it afterwards. And I think if, on Wednesday evening, if she were to say, you know what, I'm a gun owner, I'm passionate about Second Amendment rights, I misspoke a little bit there, it probably would have diffused the situation. But as you know, things just kind of intensified from there. And now it's going to be a stain on a re-election campaign that's going to be difficult to erase.
Isn't it true, though, that it's just the liberal left-wing media that's causing all of this, that what she said wasn't wrong at all? Because that's kind of what came out of her mouth on KTV. I could not believe it. The fact that it has been debunked, it has been debunked. It is not true that Democrats, that mass shooters tend to be Democrats. But she did you see the interview on KTV?
I did.
Were you as baffled as I was?
Well, I think in these types of situations, having watched her since last June and followed all her statements fairly closely, it was somewhat typical in terms of how she responds to controversial comments she's made. Part of what she tries to do is blame the news media. Part of what she tries to do is say, hey, if you understood the whole context, you would understand that this comment is not something that should be concerning. And then part of what she does is try to distance herself slightly from the original comment that she made. So she tries to do all three of these things, which we saw in her response statement. We also saw a bit of that in WKTD, and that's difficult to pull off. I think the challenge for her is, as you know, covering different re-election races she's been in with the Assembly, you say highly controversial things at the state level, that's one thing. You say it at the national level, it's going to make national waves, which is why all major news organizations ended up picking this up and running with it. So that's something she's going to have to get more accustomed to.
I'm going to ask you.
Two questions. In her explanation, do you think there's anything to her saying, in the news clips, they're not playing the whole statement? Do you agree that it doesn't change the context of what she said? There was more.
I don't think it changes the context. I think it's part of her larger effort to deflect blame and to suggest that her comments were taken out of context. And what you've seen, from WKTV and others, is links and clips of the larger
whole thing.
Context.
Right, the whole thing. We played the whole thing. If you play the whole thing, you could be talking peace and love through the entire 20-minute segment, and make those statements that Democrats, mass shooters tend to be Democrats, and you can have it in context or out of context. It doesn't change the meaning of what you said, right? I mean, she's expecting people to hear. If you listen to it in its entirety, you'll understand. No, that's just I
did understand it. Right. I understood exactly what her stance was.
It doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
Two larger considerations to raise. I mean, first, I think in her defense, Congresswoman Tenney is an incredibly hardworking representative, and she pounds the pavement. And I think part of her frustration is that she feels like she doesn't get sufficient credit for that. The media focuses on other things instead. The second consideration, however, is that she's inexperienced in Congress. She's inexperienced in terms of running for re-election, and she's surrounded herself now with a campaign manager and a chief of staff who are just as inexperienced. So I think she needs to consider perhaps surrounding herself with people who have experience running congressional re-election races and managing, congressional offices. Because if she surrounds herself with people who just go along with what she wants to do, that's going to be problematic. She needs somebody to say, hey, you know what? This might be your inclination, but to try to contain this story, here's what we should do instead. And that's not there right now.
I feel I have a lot to say about that. And the fact that I have worked on her assembly campaign for 3 campaigns, I feel it'd be inappropriate for me to comment on that. As much as I want to comment, it would be inappropriate for me to comment.
Luke, let me ask you this. When the election rolls around, in that KTV interview, you talked about the softening and the deflection. She said what I should have said was, are either Democrats or left-leaning. She was big on this Democrats or left-leaning, that she should have said it, and maybe it would have softened the blow. When the election comes around, does saying Democrats instead of does saying left-leaning instead of Democrats?
Even that is not true. When you really look at the minds of these people, we're dealing with a mental illness. Even left-leaning isn't true. But I'd like Luke's take on that.
Yeah, does that soften it at all?
No, I don't think so. And, I think Richard Hanna saying what he said on your program on Friday was instrumental in making this story persist as well, right? That was a really explosive interview, right? And so I think the news cycle, is you guys know how this works. It was going to turn. And then that comes out, and it just keeps it going even longer. No, I don't think dialing it back to left-leaning is helpful. And when I said deflect blame, that's not critical of her. Re-election races are about claiming credit, deflecting blame. Political scientists know that.
Right.
So that was not effective in terms of deflecting blame. What she should have said is, you know what? I understand some people are upset. Here's why I said what I said. Let's focus on what really matters, how to make schools safer, how to prevent this from happening again, and let's have Republicans and Democrats work together on that. That's really the best emphasis.
Well, I think we're both looking at that, and anybody who deals in politics or in political campaigns, it feels exactly, I think, the way that you feel here, and that is that to have someone, this is a perfect example of having someone on your team that understands that is specialized in dealing in public relations and political campaigns. The first advice that would be given is, okay, here's how we get out of this. But she doesn't have anyone on her team. She's the smartest person in the room. She has no one on her team to guide her, and I think that shows in something like this, which is what you had said earlier. I think that it's more evident here than in anywhere else that there was no one out there to say, here's how we get out of this.
And maybe they're saying it, but she doesn't want to do it. That's a possibility, too.
All right. How does this affect Anthony Brindisi?
Well, certainly it helps him, as has been covered already. It's helping him raise money. It's enhancing his name recognition, not only throughout the district, but nationally. So, that's all good for him. And, he's handled it in a way that seems to make sense in regards to his campaign. Yeah. So it's certainly helpful.
All right. And take you from your political science expertise, there is a part of Claudia Tenney's base that's going to agree with her. Yeah, they are left-leaning. They are Democrats. These are the ones that are going after our guns, and they're the ones that are shooting up people. So she's not going to hurt herself when it comes to that base. But what about the moderate Republicans that she really needs to win this race?
Tenney's argument is that Brindisi is too liberal, right? But on this particular issue, he's not liberal at all. And I've written about that. And so I think she's in a bit of a conundrum in that regard, where she's trying to tie him to Albany and Democrats in the legislature. And he's well rated by the NRA and looks a lot like a Republican on this particular issue. So I think that's a challenge for her. I think moderates in both parties do not like this type of rhetoric, and they don't care for this type of leadership style that's sort of fueled by populist anger. So I think, of course, it's going to help her with the diehard supporters she has, but she's looking at a re-election campaign where, Martin Babinick voters last time might very well determine the outcome of this election, and I suspect most of them are not on the same page as her in regards to how she's handled this particular moment.
Very interesting. The other thing this did is it brought up the Brindisi comments, the family comments, the anti-Italian comments that were made back in the summer. It put that right back in the limelight.
Right. So the Brindisi campaign is trying to portray this as a pattern of behavior that is not befitting a representative. So that's the argument that they're going to make, and the voters will decide for themselves, of course.
All right, very interesting. It's ucpublicaffairs.com to read Luke Perry's NY22 Minute, which is very interesting. You're following this campaign. We're at the beginning stages, even though it feels like we've been doing this for a year, because we really almost have. But this is about to get very intense. A lot of money is going to be spent here. This is one of the big contested races across the country. And Luke's column, his blog, is a very good read. Luke Perry, as always, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
We'll talk again.